Let's jump right into this explainer because today we are looking at something that honestly completely changed how I view human civilization. We're unpacking a really fascinating perspective. The idea that a single, completely overlooked small town, a place like Beaufort, is actually a perfect working model of the entire world. It's not just about one tiny town, right? It's about the actual architecture of how human society falls apart and, crucially, how it rebuilds. So if you want to understand the foundational DNA of your own community, you are in the exact right place. Okay, let's dive right into this. The source material hooks us immediately with this incredibly powerful premise. Beaufort is not merely a place on a map, it is a working model of the world. I mean, just imagine a narrow stretch of road. It isn't just asphalt and dirt, right? It's a physical space carrying the immense, literal weight of generations. It's a landscape where memory still breathes, through weathered houses, unpaid deeds, rusted gates, and names spoken at funerals. When most people look at a place like this, they just see small. But as we'll see, that assumption completely misses the point of how human history actually works. To really get this, we need to look at a fundamental contrast between the great cities and the quiet places. You've got these loud, bustling great cities that mistakenly believe they are the absolute center of the universe, mostly just because they make the most noise and generate the most wealth. But contrasted against them are the quiet places. The source argues that these forgotten, quiet places are actually the custodians of history. They maintain the crucial bloodline of historical continuity. Civilizations have historically misunderstood their own foundations, basically confusing volume and sheer scale for actual lasting substance.
To really drive this home, the author draws on something that absolutely struck me: the ancient wisdom of Hermes speaking to Asclepius about Egypt. The message is simple, but it is devastating. When a sacred center forgets itself, the entire order around it begins to decay. It's telling us that societal amnesia is incredibly dangerous. When a community forgets its identity, its history, its purpose, it's not just a localized tragedy. The entire surrounding order begins to rot. The center simply fails to hold.
So, what does this decay actually look like in practice? Well, it's not some grand cinematic explosion. If a town like Beaufort is the world, then societal collapse is actually a highly localized, deeply intimate fracture of the human covenant. Think about it. An abandoned property isn't just urban neglect, it's a physical fracture in human trust. An unheard elder? That represents a burned library of wisdom. A disconnected child who loses their identity is basically a broken compass before their life's journey even begins. And a divided household simply becomes a divided nation in miniature. And this brilliantly illustrates a terrifying yet absolutely essential truth about our world. The world doesn't collapse all at once in some single abstract event. It collapses quietly. It happens in a cascading sequence of intimate, micro-level failures. It happens family by family. It degrades conversation by conversation, value by value, and inheritance by inheritance. We're constantly looking around for these massive structural failures. But the source makes it perfectly clear that the rot always begins at the dinner table, in the neighborhood, and in the living room. But wait, here is the incredibly hopeful pivot in all this. The exact same mechanism that causes the world to collapse is the exact same mechanism that rebuilds it. Broken systems heal from underneath. Rebuilding does not happen through saviors descending from the sky, and it certainly doesn't happen because of some magic piece of legislation. It happens through families actively deciding we will become builders again. It is a conscious, highly localized choice to reverse the decay. So how does this actually translate into tangible action? Well, it starts with just one family. One family restores a home. One family preserves a piece of land. They record oral history. They plant gardens. They teach financial literacy. One family mentors boys and protects girls. One family flat out refuses addiction and learns cooperation instead of competition. This is the rhythmic, poetic momentum of actual world building. It's where massive macro-level impacts are born entirely from these localized micro actions. Which brings us to a really crucial question. What actually holds a society together? Modern civilization has made this massive mistake in believing that governments and policies are the glue. Spoiler alert, they're not. The real architecture of civilization actually relies on households, memory, morality, labor, land, and shared responsibility. When those pillars weaken, there isn't a government policy in the world that can fully compensate for the loss. But when those pillars are strengthened, even the absolute most broken systems begin to heal from the ground up. A place like Beaufort carries what the source calls a prophetic tension.
Let's break down this powerful phrase because it is incredibly profound. It represents this physical and spiritual intersection. It's right where forgotten history meets surviving faith, where a wounded inheritance physically collides with an unrealized future. Living in, or even just observing a place with this tension, it carries a unique, incredibly heavy weight. It's a space vibrating with the possibility of what could be, sharply contrasted against the very real pain of what has been lost. It literally demands action.
And because it demands action, it forces a choice. Once you become aware of this societal breach, neutrality completely disappears. Gone. You can no longer just be a passive observer. You either help rebuild the wall or you normalize the ruin. If you aren't actively engaging in the stewardship of your community, you are, by default, accepting and normalizing its decay. There is absolutely no middle ground when the very architecture of civilization is at stake. And listen, rebuilding doesn't begin with waiting for perfection. It begins with immediate practical stewardship. We need to completely accelerate our understanding of what saving the world actually looks like. It looks like cutting the grass. It looks like cleaning the cemetery and honoring the dead. It's repairing the broken porch, teaching the kids, creating local businesses, making sure the streetlights work, and ensuring food gets distributed. These seemingly mundane chores, they are profoundly important. Physical restoration and spiritual restoration are twins. They happen together. So the crucial point is how the author frames this next idea, which I found profoundly heavy. Infrastructure is psychological warfare as much as economics. Let's unpack that. People cannot continuously look at decay, day in and day out, without eventually internalizing that decay within themselves. When a community's physical environment is broken, rusted, and neglected, it wages this silent, psychological war on the minds of the people living there. It's quietly convincing them that they too are broken and neglected. The environment teaches people what they are worth. Therefore, the mission of any remnant community, any group of people trying to rebuild, is vastly larger than mere beautification. You aren't just planting a garden or painting a fence to make things look pretty. You are engaging in the fundamental rehumanization of your neighbors. You are restoring dignity. You're altering the environment so that it reflects worth, value, and hope right back into the eyes of the people who walk those streets every single day. But obviously, no single person can carry the weight of civilization alone. It's impossible. It requires a highly organized collective effort. Society absolutely needs the physical labor of builders and farmers, and the social glue of teachers and organizers. But notice what falls under the spiritual category here. Alongside healers and spiritual anchors, a community needs financiers to fund the vision. Every single household has a distinct, vital role to play, and physical resources are literally just as essential as spiritual guidance when it comes to rebuilding. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it completely reframes our view of societal failure. We often look at struggling communities and just assume there's a lack of ambition or a lack of innate greatness. But the source material corrects this beautifully. The tragedy is not that everyone lacks greatness. The real tragedy is that many were simply never taught their assignment. They have the potential to be a builder, a healer, or an archivist, but they were never handed the blueprint to show them exactly where they fit into that larger collective effort. If a place like Beaufort really is the world, the task isn't just about saving one small town. It is about proving that restoration is still possible anywhere. Here is the ultimate blueprint. We have to organize the scattered. We must make the land produce again. We've got to urgently transfer elder wisdom to the youth before it's completely gone, trading confusion for clear vision. We must make faith a practical infrastructure, not just a Sunday performance. And ultimately, we have to transform our suffering into the very architecture of our future. Which brings us to a really powerful, sweeping conclusion about historical cycles. When large systems lose their soul, renewal usually starts in overlooked places where people still remember each other's names. This right here is why remnant communities matter so immensely in every single era of human history. When the massive, loud macro systems fail and lose their humanity, it's the quiet, overlooked places, the places where intimacy, connection, and memory actually survive, that consistently step up to become the true saviors of civilization. Which leaves us with one final, totally unavoidable question. We've seen that the world decays family by family and it rebuilds the exact same way. We've seen that neutrality is a complete myth and that absolutely everyone has a necessary role, whether physical, social, or spiritual, in the architecture of civilization. So as you look at your own community, your own neighborhood, your own family, what is your assignment in rebuilding? Think deeply about that. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks a true conversation in your own quiet places.